Is Peter Stark a thing? By Forrestwarriorz. Chapter 7. Natasha. Natasha liked to consider herself an expert at learning everything about a person, at being able to figure out even the hardest person to crack, knowing their family and friends and some of their deepest secrets that not even they were aware of. She was a spy, a secret agent. That was her job. To figure out a target and find the best way to infiltrate their life without raising any suspicion. She was a master in her field. Nothing could ever take her by surprise, nor startle her. She thought of everything and knew of what could happen to her if the target discovered who she was. Typically they didn't, but occasionally she'd get assigned to an intelligent one, such as someone figuring her out and refusing to give her as many details as she'd want. So that is why she was seated at a table, hand folded under her chin as her gaze focused firmly on the enigma that was flittering about the room. A bubble of joy and energy that was mixed in with intelligence and sass from what she had seen. The joking nature and ability to adapt to anything that was sent their way, in a way that none of the others seemed to be able to do. They were left in the dust. Peter Parker. Okay, so maybe she wasn't in the room as him, but she was observing from the security cameras. From the kitchen in the Avengers suite of the compound. The teenager was apparently a common sight around the place, and Natasha recalled how Clint had seen Peter on the screen and had lit up in recognition. So Peter was probably close with the Barton kids. She turned ahead to Steve, Clint, Scott, Bucky, and Sam. They were the only current ones at the compound. Wanda was with the Masters of the Mystic Arts, and Natasha was hoping she was doing well. She couldn't worry or think about Wanda right now, but Peter was here and something that could be done about her questions on him. I thought Stark Industries didn't take interns. She waved towards the cameras. So, Peter Parker. Do you know who he is? Her eyes lingered on Clint, who wasn't meeting her gaze. Yeah. He babysits Cassie and Clint's kids, Scott said simply. Sam made a face. What? Stark Industries has a teenage intern? Isn't that illegal? I mean, internships are allowed for teens, aren't they? Scott asked curiously as he finally looked up. Some places hold it. I think Pepper Potts made an exception. You know Tony doesn't oversee interns or the new workers. Natasha hummed and looked back at the screens. Bucky swallowed his mouthful of food. I don't know. He seemed very protective of the kid. I think he even called him his kid or something. I was helping him with some fighting techniques and Stark walked in and wasn't impressed by it at all. Did he do anything? Steve asked, voice growing protective. Bucky shook his head. Nah, he was annoyed, but knew that I wasn't actually doing anything wrong or dangerous. I was holding back after all, and I think he knew that because he dropped it and left. Nothing happened. Steve relaxed and nodded. Yeah, he got really protective as well when I asked about him. Scott looked up at him and then shrugged. Well, I mean, Peter is his son, so I wouldn't be too surprised. You're still really a rogue Avenger, and a superhuman to boot. He probably just doesn't want to run the risk of you hurting him. I can understand where he's coming from. His son? No, that made no sense. Tony Stark did not have any kids. Natasha would have seen them on his file if he truly had any. Natasha paused as she considered the idea of Tony having kids. He didn't seem like the type of guy to have or even like kids. Though he didn't seem to mind Scott and Clint's kids around, which made sense if he did have a kid of his own. Something wasn't right, though. Tony had no records of having kids. Sure, there were plenty of women who tried to claim that their kids were Tony's. However, a simple DNA test quickly showed that they were lying with their claims. Eventually, people stopped believing the women whenever they said it. Natasha checked her nails as she thought over all the women who had made the claims. None of them had the name Parker. Then again, perhaps she didn't know. She glanced back at the camera screen. Peter was intelligent. He had the same kind of energy. Similar intelligence levels, and the sass and snark Natasha had heard about seemed to match. Though that could be pushed aside as Peter acting like him, just as someone who looked up to someone they idolized. Natasha could understand why Peter would look up to Tony, even though she still found it strange. But she didn't know why Tony would treat Peter differently. It wasn't obvious, but Tony was relaxed around him, not really minding it whenever Peter interrupted him or came up to him for something. Nah, just thinking, Natasha replied to Clint, ignoring the look that Scott and Clint shared quickly. What are you planning? Clint asked, but Natasha didn't reply. Line break. Natasha liked to claim that she was a calm and rational person, thinking through everything so that she could never be taken by surprise by anything that happened. Yet, here she was, struggling to remain calm enough to not draw attention to herself. Peter Parker was very much an enigma that she wanted to figure out, especially since he seemed to know she was there. He kept glancing in her direction, looking confused, and slowly morphed into frustration, as if he couldn't see what kept grabbing his attention, and he was struggling to understand why. Natasha didn't know how he knew she was there, but he did. He grumbled and turned back to the project that he was assisting Tony on. Stark glanced at him, and if Natasha was any closer, she'd swear that he looked worried. But she must have been imagining it, right? You good, kid? Tony asked as he turned back to his work. Peter shrugged, but he didn't look back to Natasha's spot. My mind won't shut off and focus for more than a few moments. You didn't have to come in today. It has nothing to do with that, Peter started, but he was cut off. Tony turned to face him. Kid, I value and care for your mental health. If you can't focus, then I'm not going to keep you here in order to let you rest. I know you may say you want to be here to focus again, but if it's stressing you out, then it's not worth it, kid. Peter sighed and ran his hand through his hair. His hair sticking up, and Natasha noticed that he and Tony did look strikingly similar. Their hair was similar, and Peter's hair was lighter and fluffier, but they spiked up in the same way. Probably had something to do with both of them working in labs. There was nothing else to it. Natasha was sure of it. But Tony's compassion towards Peter couldn't be faked. She knew if someone was lying or being insincere with their tone or words, but he sounded honest and genuine. There was no way that he was just acting like this because she was there. If he knew that she was there, he'd probably not act that way. Natasha hummed to herself as she watched the two of them. I'm also just annoyed with some of classmates of mine. It's like they're trying to get me to say that I don't have an internship here, Peter grumbled. Well, it's unbelievable, but seriously, I wouldn't keep it up for this long. I'm not that stupid. Depends on who you ask, Tony said. His voice was teasing, and received an annoyed look from the teenager. A look that Natasha had to agree was very similar to a look that a teenager would send their parents when they tried to be playful, but it wasn't the right time. Now, that did take Natasha by surprise. I'm a terrible liar. I would have been caught long ago if I was lying. Peter waved a hand around. Everyone knows that. Perhaps they subconsciously believe you? I doubt it. You would too if you'd met my classmates, Peter grumbled. Tony almost laughed. Well, I'm sure that if I met your classmates, then they'd realise you are in fact telling the truth. He hummed and seemed deep in thought. Peter frowned. No, you're not showing up in front of my school. I quite like being under the radar. If you do that, then it will be impossible to remain obscure in the minds of my classmates who don't know me. I wasn't thinking along those lines. Tony sounded innocent, but Natasha knew that was because Tony was thinking exactly that. Yes, you are, Peter muttered, looking back at the table. Tony let out a laugh and ruffled Peter's hair, and the teenager swatted his hand away. Tony said something that Natasha couldn't hear, but Peter nodded, and Tony dropped his hand onto his shoulder and gave it a gentle squeeze. Natasha looked away and quickly got up to leave the room without being noticed. She knew her boundaries. Sometimes it was better not knowing the full truth and being aware that some things were just not meant to be witnessed by outsiders. Sure, she was curious, but she could do her research on Peter Parker, Peter Stark possibly, when he wasn't around Tony. However, if she told the others about this interaction, then no one needed to know. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Okay, so Natasha's on the case, but she's also being respectful, which is something that I really respect myself. You know, she's being noble, not noble, she's being cool about it, which I like. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.